Hello PS2 gamers. If the PlayStation 2's library of games wasn't the greatest ever assembled for a single console, it was certainly one of the most diverse. While many of the PS2's best games have thankfully gone on to enjoy numerous sequels, remakes, and/or remasters, some of the projects that helped make the PS2's library as diverse as it was have since been forgotten by too many people. Here are 36 PS2 games that deserve a sequel. Rumble Racing is a PlayStation 2 racing video game from Electronic Arts. It was influenced by Electronic Arts' NASCAR Rumble and was developed by the same individuals at EA's Redwood Shores location. With so many levels to complete and tons of cars to unlock, it didn't get the respect it deserves for a sequel. CTU is investigating a series of terrorist attacks in the Los Angeles area ranging from an assassination attempt on the vice president to the kidnapping of the chairman of a highly profitable corporation. Jack Bauer must shoot, drive, and interrogate his way to the truth behind the attacks. There are 3 primary modes of play: third-person action, shooting hordes of enemies and stealthily sneaking around, mini-game puzzle solving, hacking into computers and electronic door locks, and driving missions. The game that could have been much better if developers were not trying to do too much on this game. 3 immensely powerful glyphs can open the gateway of chaos, but the glyphs must be found and recovered. 2 men, a young knight, Sieg Warhit, and a fallen lord, who were once friends, must fight over the future of their world and their people. Players control Sieg and his summoning powers. Sieg can command the legions to attack or fight defensively, and strategies must be adjusted depending on the individual legion and the situation. Players will battle through 13 savage levels in an assortment of 3D environments. Chaos Legion was rated poorly by many people, reviewers, and gamers alike, but those that actually bothered to delve deeper into it discovered a fantastic hidden gem of a game. Taken into slavery, you are now a gladiator. Your only chance at freedom is to earn enough money in the arena to buy yourself back. Whether in a lowly arena on the outskirts of the empire or in the Colosseum itself, a wide variety of opponents await: heavily armed charioteers, wild bulls, fellow gladiators, and more. After battles, it's time to train. A series of mini-games improves your attributes and your diet perfects your body. Study your rankings, play around with your special skills, and await the next battle. Set in Tokyo in the year 2049, Crimson Tears puts you in the role of one of 3 biological war weapons with a common mission: to investigate the cause of a mysterious disaster that has left the city incapacitated. Your various objectives take you into battle against hordes of enemies and into maze-like environments. Use your martial arts training and weapons to fight your way to the core of Arma, the weapons manufacturer that created you, where the answers to the mysteries lie. Its combat is deep, the shop upgrades are a nice touch, and it's just so damned fun. Promising over 100 hours of gameplay, Dark Angel Vampire Apocalypse is one of the longest adventures on the PlayStation 2. Set in the year 1640, players assume the role of Anna, the Dark Angel of Retribution. Though he was defeated a century ago, the monsters and demons faithful to the Shadow Lord have begun preparations for his resurrection. An action RPG that borrows elements from the likes of Diablo, Dark Angel Vampire Apocalypse presents players with a wide array of equipment and an arsenal of weapons, both projectile-based and melee-oriented, to collect. Eternal Poison is strategy RPG in which gamers travel through a dark, demon-infested world in an effort to save a kidnapped princess and recover a remarkably powerful treasure. Eternal Poison's mechanics are pretty solid for an RPG, and it offers enough unique elements and intriguing enough characters' story to keep you interested. However, this is not a genre-defining game, it's a generic game, and it suffers from a clear lack of polish. Eternal Poison relies heavily on its story to carry its weight, and that's ultimately too high a burden for it to bear gracefully. In this combat adventure, players take the role of a hero whose hands and feet are lethal weapons, quite literally. Hyakimaru is missing several of his natural body parts, which have been replaced by blades, guns, and other weaponry. His natural limbs were taken by demons, and he is on a quest to take them back. The story is downright fantastic. It actually keeps you interested, which is uncommon in games that aren't RPGs. The gameplay overall is very well done, but I feel that the bosses and body parts are the best the game has to offer. The immense amount of bosses in Blood Will Tell keeps you entertained, and the new body parts make the game more fun through it all. A young magician is sent by his king to investigate the strange happenings on the island of no return. Armed with his sword and his natural talent as a sorcerer, Kane attempts to be the first person to return from the island alive. Eternal Ring is the first first-person RPG on the PS2. It is done in a real-time from the first-person perspective that combines fast-paced sword play and magic spells. Oddly enough, even with all its flaws, it is still a fairly fun game to play. Gun Griffin Blaze is a 3D battle mech game. The game contains 6 scenarios with a multitude of free roaming levels. The gameplay is mainly action-oriented, allowing to customize the player-controlled robot before it goes to fight, or within the game after picking up various extras. It's addictive, fast and frenetic gameplay walks the fine line between simulation and shooter and manages to get the best of both worlds. Unlike some other mech games, you spend the majority of the game playing instead of screwing around with your robot's config. A group of Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks is a 3D platforming adventure beat-em-up that is based in the Mortal Kombat world. The story begins just after the first tournament, and fills in some of the backgrounds of various characters in the series. Fighting across several areas of Earthrealm, Netherrealm, and Outworld, this game follows Liu Kang and Kung Lao as they thwart another invasion of Earth. Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks is a near-perfect game on the PS2 era. Mortal Kombat Shaolin Monks has crisp graphics, nostalgic sound, addicting gameplay, comfortable controls. A group of assassins known as Killer 7 is hired by a man named Christopher Mills, on behalf of the US government. The group is led by an elderly wheelchair-bound man named Harmon Smith, endowed with an ability known as multifoliate personae phenomenon, which allows him to transform into 7 different personalities who were professional assassins in their lives, and whose souls were absorbed by Harmon after they were killed in a mysterious incident 50 years ago. Killer 7 is an extremely odd and jaw-droppingly violent third-person action-adventure game filled to the brim with obscure monologues, political conspiracies. A highly classified prototype mech was stolen from the Allied forces in southern Japan, and it's up to you to get it back. Take control of monstrous mechs and brave soldiers. Immerse yourself in detailed 3D battle sequences with an exciting style of gameplay that mixes in-depth strategy and real-time action as you lead the Allies to victory. Ring of Red is a very unique strategy game. It is the type of title for hardcore gamers only, as it actually makes you think and may seem boring to people that aren't patient. Ring of Red is a real-time turn-based strategy game, in the style of Front Mission 3 and Final Fantasy Tactics except different. At the far edge of the galaxy lies the desert planet of Rosa, home to Jaster, a buccaneering young pirate who dreams of journeying through space. Now, Jaster's dreams are about to come true. It promises to be a quest to discover new worlds and to solve an epic mystery that holds the key to the greatest treasure in the galaxy. Rogue Galaxy is definitely one of the best games the PS2 has ever seen. It has everything a good RPG needs, plus more. It has a huge variety of weapons, with around 800 total, amazing graphics, a good storyline, a large cast of great characters, an addicting mini-game, and even its own bizarre weapon alchemy system. Most horror movie enthusiasts would be aware of The Thing, a movie released in 1982, starring Kurt Russell, and directed by John Carpenter. The movie takes place in the Antarctic, where a group of American scientists are on an expedition to the frozen wastes. Though frustrating at times with its difficulty, The Thing is an amazingly fun game to play. It's more fluid than the past few games to have been released on the PS2. The controls, the design, everything. If you're a fan of the movie, the story alone makes this game worthwhile. The year is 22XX. The world civilization collapsed due to the lack of power after the explosion of a nuclear reactor. You are cast in a role of Lao, main protagonist whose character is modeled after the J-pop singer Gak. The entire gameplay is very similar to that of Devil May Cry games. You can jump off the walls, performs various sword attacks, and use special magic attacks while battling the minions of darkness. Tito and Red Entertainment summons the team that worked upon both Cowboy Bebop and Trigun to bring forth an action game that puts many to shame with its amazingly fluid and extremely fast-paced Chinese taiji fencing swordplay. That's just a marvel to witness. Most Clover Studio games sell poorly but are well received by critics and gamers alike. God Hand is one of the only Clover games to sell poorly and also not please critics, although more people have come around on this game in recent years. In the eyes of many players, God Hand is a glorious, cheesy beat-em-up that keeps its tongue firmly in its cheek. The game's characters, story, and special moves are over the top, which gives the whole experience a unique charm. What other video game lets players kick a look-at-her gorilla into orbit? Samurai Western is a concept so silly you just can't help but enjoy it. As the title suggests, the game features a samurai who travels through the Wild West, righting wrongs and bringing katanas to gunfights. The combat is simple but fluid, and the experience is backed up by a story that blends tropes of samurai films and spaghetti westerns. Even though Samurai Western thrives on its simplicity, it ends on an open-ended note that isn't quite a cliffhanger but doesn't wrap everything up. The main character left Japan to search for his brother and started fighting local bandits because of his samurai code, and because their ringleader is connected with the protagonist's brother. These days, Square Enix is known for developing classic RPGs, but there was a prolonged period when the studio experimented with various other genres. Sadly, the bouncer might have convinced Square to stop the experiments. The game, developed by Dream Factory, is a beat-em-up with sprinkles of RPG mechanics and multiple story routes. It was a compelling blend of concepts, but the experience doesn't hold up. The bouncer struggles to tell a decent story, and it is bogged down with way too many cutscenes and not enough gameplay. Plus, the game isn't that long. The bouncer didn't live up to its potential, but that potential still exists. If Square Enix desired to revisit the game and remake it. Vanillaware games are primarily known for their beautiful art assets often drawn by director-writer George Kamitani. The studio tried to implement 2D models created by Kamitani into a side-scrolling action RPG format with Odin Sphere with mixed results. Gamers and critics alike loved the game's story and gameplay, but its action and beautifully rendered characters were too much for the console, leading to frame errors you could count on 10 fingers. While Odin Sphere was a commercial success, Vanillaware never developed a sequel. In the early days of rhythm games, titles like Guitar Man ruled. Instead of pleasing digital audiences by pressing buttons to the beat, the game asked players to control a guitar-themed superhero as he fought wacky enemies. Guitar Man didn't take itself too seriously, but it was a blast to play and listen to regardless. While party-based rhythm games such as Rock Band eventually replaced more cartoonish and novel titles like Guitar Man, the latter are making a comeback. Considering that a remastered version of Parappa the Rapper was released for the PlayStation 4 in 2017 to critical acclaim. In many ways, Black is a pretty straightforward first-person shooter. It's short, it's fairly linear, and it doesn't even offer a basic multiplayer mode. You'd be forgiven if you overlooked Black at the time of its release in 2006, and you're still forgiven for wondering what makes this seemingly simple game so special today. However, you really have to play Black in order to love it. Black gets so many of the things that matter most in a great FPS title right. Its sound design is some of the best in video game history, its shooting is exquisite, and the game is filled with brilliant little touches that elevate it well above its seemingly simple premise. Essentially an evolution of the Lost Vikings, and other notable puzzle platformers, Project Eden tasks you with guiding 4 agents through a dangerous subterranean area as they attempt to locate missing technicians. Completing their mission requires you to make the most out of each agent's skills and solve some devious puzzles. To be honest, Project Eden is a pretty rough game. Its best ideas aren't realized often enough to make up for its shortcoming. Yet, there are just so many good ideas in this game. It's easy to imagine a modern developer making the most out of the many things this title did well and expanding its incredible world building. The art of producing a licensed video game is difficult to master, but Rockstar was more than up to the task when the studio developed The Warriors. Based on the 1979 movie of the same name, the game stays fairly true to its source material, but it also expands on the film's lore by exploring the backstories of the main characters and how they arrived at the incredible events of the film. While the original movie ends on a satisfying note, it was still ripe for a sequel that could explore what happened after the warriors make it safe and sound back to their home turf. What would the aftermath of such a harrowing night look like? PsyOps: The Mindgate Conspiracy is one of the many sadly forgotten action games of the PlayStation 2 generation. As the title suggests, PsyOps is a military spy thriller that revolves around psychic powers that are as fun to use as they are narratively interesting. Plus, the game looks and sounds far better than most other games developed for the PS2. Its only true rivals are legendary PS2 showcases such as Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty. While PsyOps is a great game mechanically, its story was a little too ambitious for its own good. The PlayStation 2 was home to many notable hack-and-slash titles that have been sadly forgotten, but few stand out to this day quite like Shadow of Rome does. The game is a fictitious take on the aftermath of Caesar's murder, where the main character, Agrippa, is forced to fight in gladiatorial battles because his father was accused of the assassination. The result is a tale of bloody combat and political intrigue that reviewers loved. Shadow of Rome was developed by none other than Capcom and was clearly designed for Western audiences. The company wanted Shadow of Rome to be the first of a franchise, and was already working on a sequel, but poor sales convinced Capcom to scrap that project and focus on what became Dead Rising. The easiest way to sell someone on Haunting Ground is to call it a kind of spiritual successor to the brilliant Clock Tower series. Much like that franchise, Haunting Ground is all about trying to survive an overwhelmingly terrifying environment while being constantly reminded of your vulnerability. This game is almost like a dungeon crawler in the way that it turns your surroundings into a tomb. Unlike the Clock Tower series, Haunting Ground assigns you a loving dog companion named Huey who you'll need to train in order to turn them into the ideal partner. Developed at the arguable height of the voice-controlled game era, Lifeline asked players to guide a mostly helpless character through a nightmare situation using only their voice. It was a unique take on the survival horror genre that asked you to figure out how far you could go without the benefit of traditional controls. Lifeline had no right to be as compelling as it was given the technological limitations of its era. It was a creative, tense, strange, and often brilliant horror game that offered so much more than a gimmick. Voice recognition technology has only improved since this game's release, which means that the right developer could really turn this into something special. Before Rockstar leveraged all of its experience creating Grand Theft Auto to produce Red Dead Redemption, the studio channeled its open-world expertise into this creative experiment. Bully is essentially a tier-rated version of GTA that still features the memorable characters and engrossing story that makes Rockstar's premier franchise so great. Moreover, since virtually everyone knows what it's like to be the new kid in school, be bullied, and serve time in detention, Bully has something GTA never really did: relatability. Gamers have wanted a Bully sequel ever since the game launched, and this desire grows with every rumor of an in-development or cancelled Bully 2 project. The world of survival horror has seen many games come and go, but Extermination never deserved the fate hinted at by its title. Even though the game features a boilerplate story filled with strangely familiar mutagenic viruses, Extermination stands out thanks to its cold weather atmosphere and combat system. Instead of collecting different guns, players can hoard weapon attachments that let them modify their single assault rifle into a monster-slaying Swiss Army knife. Extermination tried to push the survival horror experience forward by making it more action-oriented, while limited healing items and tough enemies kept the genre standard tension and scares intact. There's never really been a game quite like Steamboat Chronicles. While this steampunk RPG offers you a grand adventure worth embarking upon, the heart of this experience is found in its various side quests. It's easy to lose yourself in this RPG doing nothing in particular or even making your own fun out of the various mini-games and activities available to you. Whether you're piloting massive robots or just trying to get the band back together, Steamboat Chronicles tends to dance to its own tune. I can easily imagine some players becoming frustrated by its lack of obvious directions, but anyone who has ever lost themselves in an open-world RPG's many distractions will love the way this game turns those distractions into the main event.
I hope you enjoy it! Steamboat Chronicles!
When someone is in the mood to play a comedic third-person shooter with platforming and an armory of eccentric weapons, they'll quickly find that the Ratchet & Clank franchise is one of their only real options. However, Metal Arms, glitch in the system was once a solid contender to that subgenre crown. The game is a challenging, yet still enjoyable, trek across a planet populated by robots. If that wasn't enough, Metal Arms lets gamers possess enemies to solve puzzles or just wreak havoc. All's fair in love and war, after all. Metal Arms' glitch in the system was the first entry in what was supposed to be a new franchise. Few titles epitomize the phrase, "the best laid plans of mice and men often go awry," quite like Dark Watch. It's a stylish shooter that takes place in a version of the Wild West that is crawling with vampires, including the main character. The game tells a decent story bolstered by its fantastic horror atmosphere, but it truly shines thanks to its combat in a binary morality system that impacts the ending and gives players different vampiric abilities. While the ending of Dark Watch is satisfying enough, the developers had huge plans for the game. The studio wanted to expand on the game's world with sequels that delved into the past of the titular Dark Watch organization and even potentially explored a vampire-infested future. In most video games, time travel is used as a plot device, but Shadow of Destiny finds fascinating ways to weave that complicated concept into its gameplay. It's basically a mystery where players are given half an hour, real time, to prevent their own murder. This premise results in a twisting story about destiny, paradoxes, and how seemingly unrelated events can change the future. Even though the main character died in 2001, he visits multiple time periods to change events. While the Shadow of Destiny wrapped up nicely, at least for those who found the true ending, which was locked behind acquiring all the other endings, the game left players wanting more. Okami is less of a video game and more of an experience. The game stands out thanks to its unique art style, which mimics traditional Japanese ukiyo-e paintings, as well as special abilities that tie into that art style via an in-game paintbrush. But that isn't the end of Okami's artistry. The game also utilizes traditional Japanese instruments to create a soundtrack that is every bit as beautiful as its vistas. Okami explored a unique world sprinkled with characters plucked from different stories, and given the number of legends Japanese folklore holds. Whenever you read an article about the best games for the PlayStation 2, Shadow of the Colossus is inevitably at or near the top. The title is a masterpiece of level and art design, as the game's mostly empty fields make players feel isolated instead of bored, especially when they meet the titular Colossi. Each creature is larger than life and both a boss fight and puzzle rolled into one. Moreover, the game sucks players into with a minimum of narrative. While the team behind Shadow of the Colossus eventually created another game, The Last Guardian, gamers are still waiting for a bona fide sequel with the same design concepts. Fans are desperate for another game that lets them scale a mountainous minotaur and plunge a sword into various weak spots, all while clinging on for dear life. The closest we have is the indie game inspired by Shadow of the Colossus, Pray for the Gods. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more and hit the bell for notifications. See you in the next episode.